Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and I am still flabbergasted at this week's results, just as I
Hmm.
have been for the past 3 weeks.
Yes. Yes.
Joining me, of course, is my co-host Tiffany Seeley.
What?
Oh, wait, sorry, I had a slip of the brain and I said the
Oh,
wrong name. Of course, that
well,
would be Jessica Lewis.
that's kind of a big slip of the brain, I would think, to forget, I don't know, a name that's so significant to what you are doing at that very moment, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I
But
mean, I've
I
I've
mean,
been
it
doing this
happens.
with you for a long time, so I feel like you wouldn't forget who I am. Hmm.
I, I I don't know. I mean, it just happened, and I didn't intend to do it, and to try to vote you out of the podcast or anything like that.
Slip of the brain.
Yeah,
Oh gosh. I am fascinated by that excuse. I'm very curious, and I love that Charlie said, "I've never seen anything like that before."
yeah, yeah. I I mean, the weirder part to me is that Q said on an interview. Well, he said on Twitter that he was supposed to vote for Kenzie also, but he didn't.
Mm,
Which with Q
interesting.
on Twitter, you never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Uh,
Mhm.
but then he said that in an interview also, and said that Ben was supposed to vote for Kenzie,
I feel like maybe Ben is just leaning into the kind of aloof persona that he has
but he said it
sometimes.
in confessional.
I so I don't maybe he thinks that somehow that's going to support his I didn't really wanna vote for Kenzie. I said it in a confessional too, see?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know.
It's
Maybe he lost
strange.
track of the plan, and yeah, I
It
like.
I don't know how that but that's a huge okay, if it really was a slip of the
Mhm.
brain, could you imagine if the slip of the brain would have caused her to be voted out?
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, oops,
Oops.
I wasn't
Yeah.
supposed to write her name down." Like, that's a problem. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I like I said, maybe there was a plan where he was supposed to do it.
Mm.
And actually, as I'm thinking this through now, this makes a little bit of sense. That maybe there was a plan where he was supposed to do it and Q knew about that plan, but then there was another plan where he wasn't
Mm.
supposed to.
Right.
And so his confusion was between which plan was supposed to
Right.
be in
Are we
effect.
doing the real plan or the backup plan or the
Right.
fake backup plan to the real plan? Yeah, that
Because
whole
I could
thing.
see Q thinking that Kenzie would be the backup if Venus played an idol or a shot in the dark.
Sure.
But they wouldn't tell Q that he was actually the backup.
Right. Right.
If everyone else had voted for Venus and Venus had played
Mhm.
her idol, her vote for Q would have been what carried the day.
Right.
So now that I think this through,
I
I
love that
think,
you're processing it
yeah,
on the actual
yeah,
podcast.
in real time here, I think probably what happened is Q believed that there was a plan to make Kenzie the backup.
Okay.
And Ben heard about that plan. He thought Ben was in on this plan, but then
Mhm.
Ben's confusion, he didn't just write Kenzie out of nowhere. He wrote it because he got confused about which plan was which.
Right, it had to have come from somewhere, and
Yeah.
that's the part and I understand that we've seen Ben going through some things on the island,
Yes.
and I totally appreciate the effect that this game has
Hmm.
on your brain, but that's a really big slip up.
Right.
So
Now.
I think your solution makes sense because it does have to come from somewhere.
Hmm.
It's not something that you're just going to all of a sudden on the fly write the wrong name down unless there was a conversation about that particular name prior to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking also what that means. You said, imagine if a slip up caused someone to get voted out. If Q was also supposed to vote Kenzie
Mhm.
in his plan,
Yeah.
and Venus had actually played her idol,
Right. Kenzie
Q would
goes
have been
home.
voted out because, I mean, earlier, because he didn't write Kenzie.
Oh, if he had okay, so if it
Yeah,
had been what it was, I
right,
understand.
right. So
Well, but no,
just
because
all
then it
these
would have been one Kenzie vote, one
right, and
Q
everybody
vote.
would have wanted Q out instead of
Right.
Kenzie. So
But yeah, so
yeah.
this big slip up, big slip up.
Yes. Yes.
But if
But
he had written Kenzie down
then
and then
then
she plays the idol,
yes.
Kenzie goes home.
Right. So all sorts of possibilities. I mean,
Definitely.
none of it happened. It didn't matter.
Right. So
But
perhaps we should stick with what actually happened. There was a slip of the brain for whatever reason.
right.
Maybe we'll find out when Ben does his exit interviews and we'll get more detail there. But we do need to talk about Q,
Yes,
right?
because I mentioned how shocked I was. And that's even though I predicted Q would go this
Mm-hmm.
episode.
Yeah.
Yay,
Yeah.
David, you're right.
Oh, look. Oh, yeah.
Um,
Oh, yay. David
yeah,
was right.
yes. I mean,
Oh,
if you predict the same person like 5 times, then eventually it's gonna happen.
eventually, it's
Yeah.
kind of like when you pick everyone except one person
No,
to,
no, that's different. That's totally different because you had the opportunity to pick Q also, and you went with someone else. So,
and I did go with someone else because I wasn't going to take the easy out.
okay.
Mm-hmm. And
Mhm.
listen, we all know I'm wrong all the time anyway,
Well,
so it
yeah.
doesn't even matter who I pick.
Yeah. So
Doesn't even
so
matter.
yeah, since Q did go, as I've said for the past 3 weeks now,
Mm-hmm.
uh, even in situations where there was one key moment in time when a player should have done something different, we have to
Mm,
remember that there was almost always a much bigger series of actions or events that led to it, which was certainly the case once again this week.
yeah.
But there's another issue in play with Q because he said in his interviews that a number of his decisions were made because he was there for the title, not the money. So
Mm,
he was okay with taking a risk and being voted off if things didn't go his way.
mm-hmm.
We could keep that in the back of our minds, but in the forefront, we have to remember that our evaluation, I'm saying this like I'm talking to you. Everyone has to remember that our evaluation is of actual gameplay. So
Yes.
it's fine for him not to worry about it,
Mm-hmm.
but we will, as
Yes.
always.
Of
And
course.
we'll do our analysis from the standpoint of making the right moves to win.
Yes.
And that analysis will follow our usual path of comparing how Q played to my rules for winning that I originally wrote way back after season 1 and have been updating ever since using all the non-spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, interviews, social media, and secret scenes.
Mhm.
The most up-to-date version of the rules can be found by going to robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed and clicking on the link bubble for Survivor rules. But
Perfect.
before we address how Q did in terms of the rules, we always have some other things to discuss from the episode. I want to start with the reward challenge because as I watched, I was not sure Charlie should have won it. But somehow it didn't seem to raise his apparent threat level.
Oh, I
Pro-
see.
yeah, probably in part because Maria then won immunity again, but also because other players just mostly aren't seeing what a threat he's become.
I feel like that is fair, but also this part of the game and seeing what's been happening with Q, it's almost as if many of the players have forgotten I have to win this game. And I will say that Q referenced some of this in his exit interviews
Mhm.
that it was almost like there was like blinders. Like he's like, why are you bothering voting me? Like I'm the one who's frustrated everybody. I'm the one who is definitely going to have a lot of people on the jury that are not happy with me. And they were just so blinded by Q, and they have been for quite some time. And so I find it very curious that they were almost
Curious?
forgetting I'm
Curious?
yes,
Mm.
and I feel like Maria was probably the only one besides Charlie, because of course Charlie
Mhm.
is like, "Let's," "Yeah, not me, Q." But that she was realizing this in regards to Charlie, but
Yeah.
nobody else wanted to even consider it because they were like, "I'm just so done with Q. He's gotta go. I can't with that man anymore."
Yeah, I mean,
Interesting.
as we will obviously discuss in the next few minutes here, there's a lot more to it than that, and I think that, Q was missing a lot of that, and also contradicted himself right after saying that in at least one of his interviews. So,
Mm. I
uh,
still think it's fascinating.
yeah, oh, it is. But we'll figure that out.
All right, I
Um,
won't jump ahead.
that's right.
Gosh, that's
Now,
all you have to say. You don't have to, like, try to make me understand. I'm gonna keep doing it
okay, Tiffany.
regardless.
I mean Jessica. Um,
Funny.
yes.
Funny man.
Um, yeah. Speaking of challenges, obviously Kenzie learned how to do the balance beam from Tiffany in the
Oh
immunity
gosh,
challenge. So
that was funny. Poor Tiffany, still
yes.
getting guff
Oh yeah.
for her balance beam
Yes.
performance so
Getting
many years later.
random shots out of nowhere. Um, she said on
It was
Twitter that she knew that was coming. I was like, and you knew it was
oh,
coming from me too,
yeah.
didn't you?
It was it was great. Those were
Yeah.
great posts. I
Yes.
definitely enjoyed those very much. Thank you for still entertaining us to this day,
Yeah.
Tiffany. We appreciate it.
Now, of course, the reward for the challenge was not just Chinese takeout, but letters from home. And Liz
Mm,
was finally picked to get some food.
I
Yay!
know.
Between that and pooping, she was like a whole new person.
Oh my gosh. Really, the pooping? We're gonna go there?
They did. I mean, we're just reporting on, breaking news that,
I
you
would
know,
be very, very upset if that was in my edit. My although I probably also wouldn't be sharing with people that I pooped. It is fascinating how many people on the island did talk about pooping, which I, I still was not partaking in those conversations. However, I feel like it becomes a significant part of everyone's day when they're on the island, whether or not they've pooped. And so I guess I can't really say much about why she would be referencing it for the whole
yes.
world. I mean, we did see someone was talking to the tiki man about pooping, right?
Tim, yes.
Tim, yeah. So this seems to be a theme a little bit, I guess,
Yeah, yeah. We'll have our next podcast. Why blank pooped. Um,
because she finally ate.
well, no, she pooped before she ate.
Oh, wait. Oh, thank goodness you cleared that up.
Yes, yes. We have to get the order right.
I guess.
Um,
So yeah, she was living life.
I
Wow.
know.
Good for
Now,
you, Liz.
yeah. I In other notes about the reward, I thought it was smart gameplay that Maria and Charlie agreed not to take each other on any rewards.
Yes.
Uh,
Very much agree with that. Yes.
yeah, I mean, for a long time, I'm sure it helped keep their tight relationship at least somewhat under wraps.
Mm-hmm.
And while Maria was understandably upset at missing the loved ones' letters, I
Right.
think she was absolutely telling the truth in tribal council that there were no hard feelings.
Yeah, and I think that having a plan like that going into the the game at the beginning is great
Hmm.
because it not only allows you to hide that potential close relationship you have, it also prevents that person from being upset for not being
Right.
taken because I'm your number 2,
Yeah.
or I'm your number 1. Like, why didn't you take me? You don't have to worry about any of that because you've had that discussion, you've laid the groundwork for it. And so then it's not a shock when you actually hear it happening. So the fact that they were thinking ahead, just
Hmm.
great gameplay all around.
Yeah. As opposed to we've seen plenty of times where someone will say, I'm definitely taking you, and then they don't. Which is
Right.
like,
Horrible.
yeah, really, really bad.
Very bad.
So
Don't do that.
yeah. All right. Well, other than that, I don't really have much more to talk about from this episode before we get to the rules. Do you have anything?
We have a lot of Q to discuss.
We do. We do. And there were, of course, some other things going on, and some of that will be on my TikToks at David Bloomberg TV. Uh, but before we get to how Q did, we do want to mention that the rules we're about to discuss come in a shorter
Mhm.
and much more colorful version in poster
Yes, they
form.
do. Mhm.
Go to robhasawebsite.com/yx feed, scroll down to the poster, click on it, and order it.
Yes.
And then our shipping department will speed it to your door.
Oh,
Uh,
so you're locking me into that too? Okay.
yeah, sure. Um, I'm
I
not
know you'll
saying
get
you'll
it,
get
I
it to them
promise.
by the finale, or
I
anything, but
promise.
yeah,
I will get it to you
yes,
quickly.
yes. Um, in addition to the poster, you can always get the rules in t-shirt form,
Mhm.
and in checklist t-shirt form. So again, that's robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed.
Yes, you should definitely order it all.
Yes.
Mhm. You should. I did have a request from someone who was asking if I would autograph one of the posters for them. I said yes. They offered to pay more money. Unnecessary. I'll
Yes.
just send it. It's fine.
Yeah. The ink on the pen doesn't cost that much.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's fine. I think it's nice that they're even asking. So
Right. No, it was very
yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Well, almost everyone has wanted Q out for a while now. Like Ben said in the episode, I think every time has been the time to take out Q. The only reason they haven't is Maria convinced them to use Q as a number and a decoy. But this time, only Maria and Q himself thought Q was the decoy, while the other four were fully on board with getting him out. Ben even said this would be his favorite blindside of the season. How did Q
And
go?
that was what you relied upon when you also picked Q.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Mhm. That
That
was
was,
one of
yeah,
that was a good little catch
yeah,
there.
yep.
Mhm.
How did Q go from being discounted to becoming the target? Was it because people didn't like him? Or were the reasons more strategic in nature? Most importantly, why the heck didn't he play his idol?
That is the question we
Yeah.
all want to know,
It's
or
time to
the
figure
answer, I
out
guess.
why Q lost.
Yes.
All right. I know this sounds like a rerun, but I swear it's a new podcast. For the past 3 weeks, we've needed to start with the seventh rule, which covers idols and advantages and game mechanics.
Mhm.
And here we are yet again.
David Bloomberg is going out of order again.
Yeah.
He does
Last
not like
week,
this. I just want you all
no,
to know. I'm interrupting him to let you all know. He doesn't like going out of order.
no, no, I
So the
don't.
fact that you have had him do this for so many times, it's too much for him. It's too much.
All four of you, I'm very angry with you. I'm
Yes.
disappointed in you and I'm angry. It's not true. Now, last week, I said this was unprecedented on the show and on this podcast. I
Mhm.
don't know what word describes being more unprecedented than unprecedented, but here we are. When this Survivor episode started, I live tweeted that there was no way we would get to four people in a row going home with an unused idol.
Yeah.
After all, certainly a player would see what happened and not let it happen again. Now, I know nobody really knew about Venus's idol, at least not for sure, but still, anyone who found an idol could only use it this time or next. So,
Mhm.
of course, they would use it this time, right? Right? Right?
Yeah, you would think, but apparently not because there's a next time and you see it's better if you keep it now so you can play it for next time even though there's
Mm,
no guarantee you're going to be here next time to play it because you don't play your idol and everybody wants to put you out.
mm.
So there's that whole like process there.
Yeah, yeah, there
Yeah,
is.
bit
Um,
of an issue. Playing two I listen, if you want to play where are you gonna be 2 days from now, 1 day from now, 3
mhm.
days from now, and Survivor? That's a good thing to always be doing. You always have to be looking ahead, but at the same time, you have to get there in
Yes.
order for those moves to happen. And so whatever you do over here is what's going to get you over there. And this idea of, "Oh, I'll play it next time," which I feel like all of them have really been saying that, "I'll play it next time. I'll
Mhm.
save it, and then it will be so much more powerful next time." There is no next time if you don't play it and everyone's voting you out.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when Q found the idol, he told Maria, "If you win, I'm playing this for myself." Then she won, and he didn't.
Right.
Um, you know, I
Oh, this is where I'm gonna ask. My mother had an ask.
okay,
I'm jumping in because she is curious.
curious.
Yes. So let's see. So she humor me and ask David. And this is her question. I am still wondering why Maria didn't tell Q to play his idol after Charlie said he was putting his name down. Was he so sure the girls were following her? I still would have given him a heads up. Maybe she wanted him gone. This is my mother's question.
Yes, and that's perfect timing for the question because I was about to give the answer. So,
Oh,
look at
see?
that.
Look at
I
this.
just knew. Um,
Excellent job, mom. Great.
yeah, yeah, because Q did give an answer in his interviews, and we saw some of it. You know, basically similar to Hunter, he did the math and believed he had the votes. And we saw Maria assure him on the show that he'd be there the next day. She believed Kenzie and Liz, and she passed along that feeling to Q.
Mm,
Um, and I think we'll get a little bit more into that in rule 1. But yeah, it comes down to yes, Charlie told Maria, "Hey, we're going for Q, and I think I have Kenzie and Liz." And I
mm,
think what Maria was like was, sure you do.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
she didn't she didn't think that Kenzie and Liz did a good enough acting job to convince Maria, and then, so there was no reason for her to alert Q.
Right, right. And I feel like that's fair, but I also think that it's interesting that she would she have even mentioned it to Q that, "Hey, by the way, like this is what Charlie said to me." Did they have that conversation?
No, well, not that we saw.
Okay.
She
Okay.
just she just said, "You'll be here." You might get a vote or two, but you're gonna be here.
But here's the thing that I still don't understand about the decision, right?
Mhm,
And I don't I if you just kind of look at the numbers and look at the math, even if she does think, "No, they're really targeting Charlie and not Q,"
mhm,
but just in case, maybe Q should play his idol anyway, because then we're down to 5,
mhm,
and I still have Q, and I'm the only one that Q's listening to. He's not listening to anybody else. And so I'm just wondering if it would have been worth the risk versus reward for Maria, because she's now finding herself in a situation where she's thrown Charlie under, like Charlie
mhm.
knows that she targeted him, so she's lost Charlie and she's lost Q. So now she's kind of on her own,
Oh, yeah.
and Charlie's with the girls and not Maria anymore. And so I feel like they should have just said, "You know what? Just to be safe, let's do that. If Charlie is such a
Mhm.
threat to win this game, let's take him out now and not have to worry about it and just do it, and then we'll deal with the ramifications later."
Yeah, and it comes down I mean, I don't know that she well, I do think she could have convinced him if she told him. Um,
Mhm.
but his thought process was, as you indicated, he could save the idol, use it at
Right.
Final 5 to ensure he gets to Final 4, and then he believed he could beat anyone in fire making, so that would get him to
Right.
Final 3.
Right.
So it was a risk with a very big payoff,
Oh, and I
if
don't
it
disagree with that.
succeeded. Uh,
Right.
but should Maria have it's an interesting thought experiment because I believe I saw that Q said in some interviews that he was going to turn on Maria next.
And I wouldn't be
Um,
surprised on that, but now I just feel like for Maria, not knowing that
right,
Q would
right.
turn on her,
Mhm,
believing that Charlie would turn on her,
mhm,
I just feel like you need to have somebody, if you truly feel like one of those 2 is, because she said, I'm voting out my
right.
first for my second, essentially.
Yeah,
Now she doesn't have either, and so it's like, what is that, the saying of the devil you know versus the devil you
right,
don't, and
right.
so would Q have turned on her? I Probably, but now she has to win or she's out.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know. I mean, should she have told him to take the risk? I mean, it comes down to, following what you believe is going on.
Sure.
Should they have talked it through more? Probably. Did they?
Mhm.
We don't know. We don't know if they
Right,
did or not.
right,
Uh,
and
he,
that's true.
I didn't see anything in interviews indicating that they did.
Right.
Um, but would he have even listened? Probably. But she would have needed to explain why, and I think she just, didn't pick up on anything. Um,
Mm,
but getting back to Q and what you said about looking ahead, like you said, we've heard about that from everyone. They
right.
keep making these big plans for the future without considering they have to make it past the
To the
present.
future.
Yeah, yeah. Every one of them convinced themselves they could pull it off.
Mhm.
Every one of them was wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Not
So
good
let's
gameplay.
yeah, let's go back to the first and most important rule, which of course is to scheme and plot. And I've said for however many weeks in a row that this is the background to all the idols not being played, scheming and plotting.
Mm.
And we were
Right.
already, kind of talking about that.
Mhm.
We see why this is so important because Q said in an interview that he did not have the relationships with Kenzie and Liz that Maria did. So he had to rely on her discussions with them.
Yes.
So going
Mhm.
back to that, if he had good relationships with them, he wouldn't have had to rely on her.
Right.
He was like strategizing secondhand and had to
Yes.
go with what Maria thought. Maybe if he had talked to them directly, he could have caught something. Maybe not, because I think they were pretty convincing. But you never know. Every time someone has to tell a lie, there's a chance of a slip up.
Right.
But like we were just talking about, Q believed Maria had them on lock, so he didn't verify it for himself.
Right. And I think his inability to scheme and plot really stems back to all of the things that happened around day 18 or so when
Right.
he, decided that he was going to quit, and
Hmm.
that really soured a lot of people. He had already been souring people
Yes.
who he had been strategizing with, but his idea of strategizing was more like, "Hey, this is what we're gonna do," and that was wearing very
Yeah.
thin on people, and so I think he put himself in really an
Oh yeah.
impossible situation and had to rely on her to strategize for him because that bridge had been burned, and
Yes.
there was no going back, couldn't fix it, and so, unfortunately, when you do have to rely so heavily on somebody else for your strategizing, that can be a huge issue for you personally
Hmm.
because, yeah, like you said, you have to rely on her read of the situation and how they spoke to her and what they said, because we all know when you communicate with someone, there might be a tell, there might be something
Hmm.
that you pick up on, and if you're not involved in those conversations, you miss out on those,
Right.
and you have to hope the person like Maria is picking up on something that she might not be because they're speaking to Maria versus Q.
Right. Right. And then there was another contributing factor to Q believing that Liz and Kenzie would go along with the plan, and that was something that you brought up earlier. Now, a few times this season, we've talked about players who couldn't see the game from the perspectives of others. In Q's case, it was a little bit reversed. He believed he saw the game from their perspective,
Mm,
but it was actually the perspective that he thought was the right one,
yeah.
where they had different ideas. In
Mhm.
his mind, Charlie was obviously the bigger threat, and the correct move would have been to take out Charlie,
Mhm.
which is what he believed was going to happen. But he said that he, like you said, forgot how fascinated the other players were with him. And the thing is, you can't assume the people are going to play according to your view of what's optimal.
Right. Right.
And it's similar to poker. Not everybody makes what you believe is the best move every time. I
Mhm.
have seen players get mad and start ranting because they ran what they considered to, be a perfect bluff, but an opponent didn't go for it. And, they called them down, ended up winning the hand, the opponent. And the person bluffing blamed the opponent for not doing what they believed was right and folding. They got
Mm,
mad at
mhm.
someone else for beating them in a hand. They're like,
Right.
I should have convinced you. If you were a good player, you would have been convinced. And it's like,
Maybe they're a great player because they
yeah,
called you bluff.
exactly.
Right.
Um, and yeah, that's the same sort of thing. Q saying, well, they should have seen it this way. Well, they didn't, though. And
Right.
so,
And I do think that Q has muddied the waters in how people are viewing what is happening on the
mhm,
island because they are so distracted by Q. And if you think about it, what else are they doing 24/7? They're playing Survivor. And
yeah,
so they're having to deal with all of these emotions and all these issues. And if he's really just getting under their skin and they're just like, I'm so done with him, it's going to be very hard for them to see what's actually going on. And Charlie is probably just sitting back going, God, I love this. This is great.
Yeah.
Because it's such a distraction. It's like the shiny keys. Look over here. Don't look at me. Oh, that Q. He's so frustrating, isn't he? Oh my gosh. And you just keep
Oh,
feeding
yeah.
that narrative. And Liz and Kenzie are like, oh, he is. And it's such a great gameplay for Charlie to have because
Mhm.
he's got like a shield that he didn't even intend to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, going all the way back to before the game began, I worried about Q for different reasons because
Mm,
he said he was going to be his tribe's quarterback. And people like that often end up having a lot of discussion about them in the second rule when they go out
right.
early, which was kind of what I expected because being the leader typically doesn't work out. And yeah, we'll certainly have some things to talk about in the second rule in a little while here. But his strategy for being in control actually seemed to work for a while. Uh,
Mhm.
he had made an alliance with Tiffany, Kenzie, and Jelinski right away. Then, of course, turned on Jelinski several minutes later and flat out told everyone that, they were voting for Jelinski. Like there was,
Mhm.
like I remember Tiffany was trying to have a discussion, like we should vote out, Banu. And he's like, no, we're voting Jelinski.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and, uh, but he kept up the pretense with Jelinski himself right up until it was time to actually vote.
Mhm.
And so that was, some good scheming and plotting there.
Sure.
Then, as Yanu continued to crumble, he maintained that lead role. As he later said, he was Jess's number one and Banu's number one. And again, he directed the decisions.
Mhm. I
Then,
feel
okay.
like I was just gonna say, like, I feel like he was also on a tribe of people who probably picked up on that
Hmm.
he wants to be in charge and
Right.
he wants to be calling the shots. And so I feel like he was being placated a little bit as well. They're like, "Okay, we'll let him do that. We'll let him feel like he's
Hmm.
calling the shots and feel like he's in charge, even though it's going to frustrate us at times. We'll talk to each other about how it frustrates us, but we're going to let him do that
Right.
rather than causing an issue and it being a problem because at that point in time, it was still beneficial to their own games.
Yes.
So when you've got Kenzie and Tiffany looking at it going, God, he's making me crazy, but this is still helping us. So we're fine because we still have the numbers and
Hmm.
we're running the show. So it was like however long that relationship would benefit all three of them was however long that relationship was going to last. And
Right.
unfortunately, he decided when that was going to
Well,
change
yes.
as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
But before we got to that point, when the merge approached, he proposed an alliance at the Journey, of course, to bring together physical threats, Tim and Hunter, with each having another person. And this was a good plan for him if other people had stuck to it. But of course,
Including him.
well, no, he stuck to it until they didn't,
I know, but
because every player had the nerve to have their own ideas. Um, and right off the bat, Tim wanted to go after Hunter. Then Tiffany mentioned Maria. And then all hell broke loose, which is part of what I mentioned we'll get to in the second rule. But until that
that's great.
moment, Q was still directing a lot of the traffic and felt like he was in charge.
Mhm.
And, then of course, Liz got people to turn on Tevin, and Q wasn't happy about that. So he told Hunter, and Hunter ran off, and people were getting angry. And this is when, what's on my shirt happened, the little nuclear explosion there. Um,
A
because
bit.
Q suggested in tribal council that the others should vote him off.
Mhm.
Now, we finally got to hear his explanation of what happened, and it was similar to what I had interpreted from watching. He said he felt he had screwed up because the vote was turning on Tevin, but then the last minute attempted change upset Liz, which made him feel like he'd screwed up. And he said that in his real life, when he screws up, he admits it, which I would say is admirable.
Mhm.
But that's real life, and this is Survivor.
Yeah.
And still, as he said in his interviews, the others didn't take him up on his offer. So that was the end of it as far as he was concerned.
No.
Well, as far as he was concerned, like he
As far as
wasn't. he wasn't going to keep offering to quit. He offered
Right. No, I
once,
understand. He
you know.
he thought, "I'm gonna say this one and done, and they're all gonna move on," and they're gonna be like, "Oh, that was so funny, Q. Why would you do that?" But no, it really infuriated people. I will say as well, I do think that is an admirable quality to have, but
Mhm.
yes, outside of the game of Survivor,
Yes.
because there are serious ramifications for trying to change a vote at the last minute and creating the chaos that he created and just kind of flipping things on their
Mhm.
head and just confusing everybody. That's not someone that's trustworthy. That's not someone that you want to play the game with when it is being done in such a fashion. It's not like it was, oh, I'm just discussing options and maybe we should try this and maybe we
Mhm.
should try that, or scheming and plotting with other people behind their back. No, you're offering yourself up, causing chaos, and then trying to take back over after you've done this. So it's a really difficult person to play the game with.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't try to take back over right away
That's
because,
fair. He took it easy for a few
he
days.
basically went into hiding and just kept
Yes.
himself apart from the tribe. He didn't appear to strategize or play the game, but during that time, Maria came to him and he kind of made his way back more and more with each passing day.
Mhm.
They let him stick
Mhm.
around to the point that by this episode, Ben said Maria and Q think they've been running the show for a while.
Yeah. Well, and I think that Maria's decision to scoop him up was not a bad decision at
Oh
all
God, it was
because
a great
now,
decision. Yeah.
yeah, now you have 2 votes instead of just 1, and
Mhm.
if no one else wants to play with him, then he's definitely going to be like, "Whatever you want, Maria,"
Oh yeah.
which is why I go back to the she probably should have told him to play the idol, but
Mm.
we've already discussed that.
Yeah.
But I do think that for Maria, smart move. Everyone else had just kind of written him off,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, that's not a great thing to do when there's only so few people left in the
Right.
game. You just smile and nod and try to get through it as best as you
Yes.
can
Yes.
and utilize that person in the same way that Maria's trying to.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we move on from this rule, I want to also mention Q's assessments of other players. There was both a scene on the show where he was talking about Charlie and then a long secret scene where he was evaluating all the other players. And I won't go through everyone, but for the Charlie part, he underestimated Charlie and talked about how he didn't think Charlie would turn on the six while we had cuts to Charlie thinking about the possibility of turning on the six.
Right.
Now, as it turned out, Charlie didn't need to because everybody else did. Uh,
Right.
but in the secret scene, he called Tevin naive, which was a big mess,
Mm.
because
Mhm.
of all the things Tevin may have been, naive was certainly not one of them. Um,
Sure.
and he thought that Ben was playing a Tony type of game, which was just hilariously wrong.
Yes. Yes. I don't
So,
think Tony ever had a slip of the brain where he wrote the wrong name down.
no, no. Or if he did, it was definitely on purpose. Um,
Yes.
yeah. So, all right. Well, we can move to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I was very worried in the pregame that Q would go out early
Mm.
by trying to take control. And he did indeed take control, but he managed to somehow make it work for a while. But
Mm.
then once people started acting again on their own ideas instead of following his, things quickly spiraled out of control.
Mhm.
You had mentioned earlier that this had been building for a while. Even in the earlier days, Kenzie and Tiffany were getting annoyed with Q, flipping back and forth and making decisions while they were supposed to be a three-person alliance. And I think a lot of his issue was that he often didn't have conversations. He gave instructions.
Yes, he did, and I think that that is why I think Tiffany and Kenzie worked so well
Hmm.
together with Q because those 2 were willing to have those discussions and have
Hmm.
those conversations and decide that, okay, what Q is telling us does make sense even though we don't like the way that we're being told what to do. So, he benefited off of their ability to play that way and have those conversations. And so it really almost emboldened him if you think about it because he would say this is what I want to have done.
Hmm.
And then that's what would happen and so he'd be like, "I'm in charge, look at me." But he wasn't the only one doing it. It was the
Right.
people that were deciding to do it with him.
Right. Yeah. And then, of course, we already talked about how things spiraled when he was no longer the driver in the Tevin vote. But even before then, he had been telling Hunter that Tiffany was trying to get him out and telling
Mhm.
Tiffany that Hunter was putting her name out there. And then he caused a split in the supposed six, and uh, or that did, and also made Hunter reevaluate what he thought of his fellow Mississippian, who he thought he could work well with. As Hunter said in his interviews, he realized Q could not take his foot off the gas for a moment.
Mhm.
Now, I know that Q told Mike Bloom that if everyone said he was the reason their games crumbled, that was good. But no, it's not. It's just not. I'll agree with him when he said he shouldn't be allowing them to play the game they want to play. But that doesn't mean blow up the games of the people who were supposed to be your allies and could be used to help you move forward.
Or could be on the jury when you're sitting there in a final 3 having to make arguments as to why they should vote for you, and they're like, "Hold up, you made my game crumble."
Yeah. Yeah,
Not a
and
good
not
response.
not in a good way. Not in
No.
a not in I mean there's obviously no good way. Not in a way that they perhaps would have respected.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're literally just like as your T-shirt is indicating, that was what Q kept doing, and that is not something that people are necessarily going to respect as a game move. They're going to
Mhm.
be frustrated as we continue to see the players with Q be frustrated so much so that they could not get away from the idea of
Right.
Q being voted out, regardless of the fact that he would have had a very, very hard time in a final 3.
Maybe.
I know. I
He
listen.
yeah, he
I
thinks
know.
not, but yes, yeah.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah,
this is one of those things that I've talked about before. I was kind of
yeah.
hoping that he would be that, like, he could pull off this type of game, like, that
Right,
we've never seen a game like this
right.
before, and all of a sudden it's like a Kaiser Sose moment where
Yeah.
he's like, "Haha, this was all my plan
Mhm.
all along." And I mean, maybe it was, but it doesn't sound like it. It
No,
sounds like
no,
he
yeah.
was just like blowing things up.
Right, right. All right, well, moving back towards this vote, Q had additional issues in this role. He had become so obviously close to Maria that they were considered a tight duo, which is always dangerous. Uh, Everybody saw it. Charlie made sure, as you talked about earlier, to mention it over and over again to really drive home that point.
Mhm.
Last week, Charlie even talked about a situation where Maria was safe, saying it's the classic survivor. If you can't go for your target, go for their number one. Which,
Mhm.
yeah, that was the same thing I said in the few minutes I was on stage during a commercial break in Chicago. Um, but of course, both Charlie and I said that before the whole Venus conversation.
Right.
But that was last week's topic. It it just meant the targeting of Maria's tight number one was postponed till this week.
Right. But also, I think it's interesting that Charlie is focusing on Maria's number 1 being Q as
Hmm.
opposed to saying, "I could be seen as her number 1," which means he and Maria must have done a great job, what it appears that they have, hiding that from people, whereas it was not being hidden from people when Maria and Q
Right.
were together, and that's probably because nobody wanted to work with Q, and if she's the only one who's talking to Q, it becomes very, very apparent that there's a relationship there.
Yeah. And he went out of his way to downplay it. I mean, we saw conversations where somebody, I think it was Kenzie, but maybe not, would say something to him like, I know you two are tight. And he was like, we're friendly, but this is the game. And we're not as tight in the game.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so he definitely downplayed that. And, him taking and Q taking Maria on the reward, then Maria taking Q while making
Mhm.
excuses about why she
Yes.
was taking Q. Um, all that just piled on top of each other. And
Yeah, like,
like,
"I'm gonna take someone who hasn't eaten." Hmm,
yeah,
but
hmm,
he just ate. It's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
Crazy. A little obvious.
yeah. Now, finally, for this rule, I would say that in this case, holding his idol was, in addition to everything else we said, indeed scheming too much. We
Yeah.
already discussed this in the seventh rule, but planning too far ahead such that you don't see what's happening right in front of you definitely falls into this rule as well.
Yes. And not that this is the same thing, but I did have this moment when I was thinking about whether or not, like, is it the better idea to play the idol just in case, or if you If you don't think so, is it a better idea to keep it in your pocket?
Mhm.
And I had that moment when Parvati played 2 idols that she played for 2 other people just in case one of them was going to be the target because
Mhm.
she wasn't entirely sure who was gonna be
Right.
targeted, and so she played 2 idols, which was a crazy move, but
Mhm.
it worked,
Yep.
and so I feel like that's the type of mindset that makes you there's something to be said about playing safe, but also there's something to be said about making a move when it probably is the best thing for you to do
Yes.
because right now with everything that's happening and taking all of these things into consideration, that can be a game-winning move for you because you can be like, "I was looking out for
Mhm.
this person. I was trying to protect my alliance, and I wanted to take that chance." So, I just kind of had that moment where I thought, "Well, there was someone who was willing to play 2 idols, not even on themselves, but to
Right.
protect other people in order to keep those people around who are gonna further their game," which brings me back to Maria probably should have convinced Q to play the idol anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, the third rule tells players to be flexible, and obviously Q was the most flexible player on the season, right?
I'm gonna go with, "What's your t-shirt got on
Yeah.
it?"
Boom.
No, but here's the thing that's interesting about Q. Q was very dead set in his ways with, "This is what we're doing, and this is why I wanna do it." But then the next vote would be like, "No, this is what we're doing, and this is why I wanna do
Mhm.
it." He seemed to be, like, willing to go in any direction, but also it was always the Q direction. So it
Yes.
didn't matter who he was really, having a relationship with over here and talking to over here. The next week he's going to talk to these people over here. And he's just like you said, he was talking about turning on Maria, even though they were super close. So it was this kind of playing all over the map, but very much wherever Q wanted to go, that was where everything needed to go.
Yeah, I mean, Q himself summed up how well he did in this rule when he kept saying things like, "If you don't play my game, you're probably not going to last." He wanted to play a certain way with certain people, and
Mhm.
that was that.
Yeah.
Mariah told Rob back in her exit interview, Q is a very stubborn guy. He has a very specific paradigm of people.
Mhm. Yeah,
Now,
well said.
yeah, another issue was something about, I mean, you kind of talked about it, but just to focus in on it, he was so reactive. He heard something and
Yes.
immediately wanted to act on it by voting that
Yes.
person out.
Yeah.
Tiffany is a perfect example. She was his number one for a big chunk of the game until she had the nerve to want to do something that he had not approved.
Yes.
And then that was it. He wanted her gone because that was, quote, old Survivor, not Q Survivor.
Yeah, if you're talking about Q Survivor, then you're
Hmm.
really, really only focusing on Q.
Yeah. Yeah. And he said that throughout. We got to play the Q game. Uh,
Mhm.
so, so yeah, not so much flexible.
No, not flexible.
All right. Well, the fourth rule tells players not to let their emotions control them. And we were just talking about Q turning on longtime allies because they didn't do what he wanted them to do. I do think part of that was Q letting his emotions get the best of him sometimes. Like
Mhm.
he just didn't feel like himself if he wasn't in charge.
Hmm. But also, the whole vote me out because I did something wrong, that was all emotion.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and again, I can respect that wanting to step up and say that was me. But again, this is Survivor, and
Hmm.
so there are consequences for your actions, and if that's the game that you decide you wanna play, now you have to deal with those consequences, and I
Yep.
think all of that came from just a place of emotion as opposed to gameplay.
Oh, yeah. And, I mentioned it at the top of the podcast that, okay, if he wanted to do it because he didn't feel like he needed the prize the same way that others did, oh, well, that's your choice. But it's still an emotional choice that interfered
Mhm.
in his ability to objectively play the game.
Yes.
And yeah, in the game, I don't care if someone is the type of person to take responsibility for their mistakes in real life. In Survivor, you blame someone else or you ignore it entirely unless for some reason, somehow taking responsibility will actually help you. There are rare
Yes.
cases.
Mhm.
That wasn't the case here. And he put himself in such a bad position with his actions. Now, yes, he managed to come back from it. That doesn't mean it was okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, if you're gonna step up to take responsibility in Survivor, you need to be ready for the consequences that are
Right.
going to flow from it,
Well, and he was.
because
He said he was from the perspective of if I get voted out, I get voted out. But from
right.
the game perspective, yeah,
Right, but then it's the ripple effect,
right.
right? So he wanted to step up and say, "Okay, I'm gonna own this. This is me. Vote me out." It didn't go to plan. It didn't go to Q plan,
Mhm.
and so he's still in the game. And so then all of a sudden he just thinks, eventually, a couple days go by when
Mhm.
you said he's laying low. Then he's like, "Okay, no, we're back. We're good.
Yeah.
All that other stuff, it doesn't matter. We can
Right.
we can kind of move on from that."
Right.
And you've already created the world in which you're now existing, and you can't get away from it. So yes, not a great decision for him as far as game mechanics are concerned.
Yeah. All right. Well, the fifth rule reminds players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. Now, I do think Q ended up leaving the game on a high note in terms of people viewing him favorably on a personal level, but he definitely had ups and downs, with the lowest point being
Hmm.
the stunt in the Tevin Tribal Council.
Yeah.
After that, we heard from a lot of people that they weren't happy with him personally, and literally no one was talking to him for a while, with the exception of Maria checking on him.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm going to do another long list here, like we did last week, with certain people saying things. So
Oh, I love
Kenzie
this.
Kenzie said she had no respect for Q or the way he played the game, adding that keeping him was like spitting in the face of everyone who's ever wanted to play. Ben said Q was a schemer and a bit of a bully. Tiffany added in her interview with Dalton Ross that Q was constantly going at it with Ben. Plus, she noted uh, that she saw it with Liz, and he was also always going at it with Venus. She added, the problem was that Q kind of wanted to take on this leadership role around camp, and you're playing with a bunch of people who are also leaders in real life. So that's not going to fly out here. And it was
Mm,
just a lot of
mhm.
clashing of personalities and a lot of people who were just tired of trying to pet his ego and make him feel like he was the coach. Like, dude,
Yes.
you're not our coach. Go coach whatever little league team you do at home. That's not going to fly out here.
Right.
Uh,
Is there
Now,
more on the list?
no, not on the list. Go ahead.
Okay. I do think that that is a great point that was mentioned about,
Mhm.
there's so many strong personalities that get chosen to play Survivor, which is
Yeah.
probably why they get picked to play Survivor.
Mhm.
So to think that you're going to come into this group of people and take control in the way that Q was planning on doing so and
Mhm.
wanting to do so, it I can understand entirely why he'd be against a tough crowd doing that,
Right.
because a lot of players are not just going to roll over that easy and just accept it, because they're those same big kind of alpha
Mhm.
personalities. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I do want to say that Q did talk about the Ben situation in his interviews. He told Mike Bloom that it stemmed from a conversation they had after the Tim vote that, in his words, did not go so pleasant. Q says he got ticked off because Ben didn't really like talking strategy, which I believe is something we've talked about here before.
Mm.
And and would give Q what Q characterized as a BS answer. Uh, so there is that. But
Well, and he also did, Q did talk about how there was a lot of things that, and we have to take this for what
mhm,
it is, that we didn't necessarily see were conversations where he was apologizing to people
right.
for certain things, and the only one that we saw was the Liz conversation when he apologized to her.
Yeah, the secret
So
scene.
I am yeah, so I'm curious how many more of those moments might exist that we just don't know of.
Yeah. Now, another thing that Kenzie had said about Q was he's evil and self-centered and selfish. And then we heard from Charlie, who said, I don't think Q's a bad person. I don't think Q's evil, but I'm fine with other people thinking that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Charlie is just living his best life
Yeah.
with Q being there, being the center of attention.
Yeah. Because he wanted a Final Four without Q or Maria in it. And he was
Mhm.
able to use Q's behavior to stoke that feeling in other people. Now, earlier, you mentioned that a lot of people were really, upset with Q and really wanted him out. And then at the beginning of this rule, I said, he was probably on a high as far as those things go. I do think that he had climbed back up so that people were not so angry with him anymore. Yes, they
I don't
wanted him
know.
gone, but I don't think they were personally angry with him anymore.
Well, Ben and Kenzie walked into that tribal council
Mhm.
decorated and so happy and
Yes.
excited for the show that was going to commence that
Yes.
I feel like there was still a lot of feelings there.
I think
And
you're
that,
definitely right for Ben, now that I think about it, because Ben did have that situation with Q where it was this back and forth and he didn't,
yeah.
you know, um, and even
And if you're
Kenzie
calling
might have
someone
too. Yeah.
evil,
Yeah.
evil,
I
I
mean,
just
that was
that's
several
heavy.
that was a few episodes ago. So,
Yeah.
where she said that. I I just think most of them, didn't certainly Charlie didn't do it for that reason, as we just talked about. I don't think Liz did it for that reason. I think they did it for, other less emotional reasons.
Yeah, I disagree a little bit.
Mm.
I think that they were so that it was like blinders where they were like, I'm so over him. I'm so done with him. I do not want him around anymore. He needs to be off this island. I don't care if there's only 2 days left. I can't take it. And I feel like that got in the way of, but wait, could he win the game? Let's think about this for 5 seconds. Could he actually win the game?
Well,
And that's like the conversation they should have been having with themselves.
but that leads us to the sixth rule, which warns against being too much of a threat. Now, back in the first rule, we discussed how Q said in interviews that the other players should have, uh, you know, seen taking out Charlie as their best move. But the funniest part of this is that, while Q said in interviews that he thought that was the best move to take out Charlie, he also believed he could win if he made it to final three.
Right, right.
So then, by his own logic, they were absolutely right to get rid of him.
That is very fair. That is definitely very fair. I don't think he's right. I mean, it would have been an incredible tribal council to watch because
Yes.
he Q you got to love the guy for being so confident and being so sure
Hmm.
of himself. I mean, that's fantastic. And to walk into that tribal council, I think he would have been the most confident and the most like just
Hmm.
owning everything he did and explaining it almost to his detriment. And,
Yeah.
he wouldn't even really necessarily realize that this is not a great argument for you to be making. But I feel like he would have really like stepped up and been very, very entertaining. And who knows, maybe people would have looked at it and said, wow, he really, he really did play the hell out of this game considering where he started from and where he
Right.
ended up and everything that he did in between. So, is there a possibility? Sure, because we've seen some people win that we were left head scratching a little bit.
Hmm.
I just feel like there was so much animosity built up towards him that that would have been a very big hurdle for him to get over.
Yeah. Yeah. And, through the season, his threat level was like a roller coaster. He was a big threat.
Mhm.
Then after saying he wanted to be voted out, he became a small threat.
Right,
And, as people noted over the course of episode 9, that no one was going to vote for him to win the $1,000,000. And Tiffany told Mike Bloom, I think the reality of the situation was that nobody was afraid of Q. They were just like, yeah, he's getting on our nerves, but we think we can beat him. So we'll keep him around.
right,
And then after he was the decoy for a few episodes and his stock was on the rise again, he became a bigger threat again, with Venus telling Rob there was some thought Q could win because it was impressive for him to be able to cause a cloud
right.
of confusion so many times in the game.
Well, and
I,
if he had explained it in a way, and
yes.
this is where I'm going back to that my dream, what I was hoping to have happen
Hmm.
is that he would explain it that this was purposeful. I did this on
Right.
purpose because I wanted to create chaos because I wanted to cause people to focus on other things
Hmm.
and to lose sight of the game. And look at what I did. I caused so many people to lose
Right.
sight of the game because of my antics and because of what I did. It could have been a great argument because people don't play Survivor like that.
Right.
And I would have loved to have seen if that's what it was to have him explain it and argue it to the jury.
Yeah, it would have been interesting. Like, would he have told the truth about his offer to quit? Because if he
I
gets up
don't
there and
know.
and tells the truth and says, I did it for the reasons we've already discussed, people are going to be like, really? You don't need the money? Well, then fine. We're not giving it to you.
Right. Right.
So he would have had to come up with a different reason for that. He could have owned it and said, I felt I messed up. But if he added in the part of, because I don't need the money,
Right.
then if I were on the
That's not
jury, I
gonna
was like,
work.
well, okay, then I'm not going to give it to you.
Right.
Um,
You don't deserve it.
yeah,
Never mind.
yeah. Now, personally, I still think he was less of a threat than Charlie as far as who was more likely to win. But
Mhm.
for the immediate near term, he was more of a threat in his duo with Maria because nobody wanted those two at the end. And that's
Right.
where it gets to, you were talking about the emotion and how they focused on Q. They did, but only because Maria wasn't available. If
Yeah.
Maria had been available, I don't think they would have all been like, we're sick of Q. We're voting him out. I think they would have voted Maria. So I
And
think that,
that's fair. And
so
I am very curious too with the edit being what it is, how much of Charlie's gameplay is really as apparent to the people who are playing the game with him. We are looking at Charlie
I,
going,
I,
"Wow, he's doing a great job."
I don't think much of it is.
And that's what I so he is doing a
Mm-hmm.
really fantastic job of maintaining his threat level
Mm-hmm.
in a way that allows other people to be the focal point and not him. And so we're sitting here going, "Oh my god, you should have voted out Charlie." But in
Mm-hmm.
their world, maybe they were like, "No, why would we do that? Charlie's with us. Like
Yeah.
he's a, and so I am curious if that played into it as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can move to Appendix A, which is about the players keeping their end goals in mind when voting. And we talk about voting out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. We're still at the part of the game where players should be targeting strong threats. And we
Mm,
just discussed how Q's threat level was on the rise. If Maria had been vulnerable, like I just said, I think she would have been the target. But with her winning immunity, we discussed it earlier. We discussed it last week. You target the lieutenant. But also, Charlie talked in tribal council about all the considerations going into a vote decision. Quote, are they good at challenges? Are they good at making fire? Are they someone the whole jury is going to want to vote for? Do you want them around camp the last couple days? The funny thing is that I don't think the reasons for voting Q out were listed in there at all.
well, but wait, do you want them around camp for the next few
I
days?
mean, I know that they didn't want him around camp, but I don't think I don't think that's why they voted him out. I think they voted him out. I mean, not to jump to my conclusion here, but in large part, they had been talking about it because he was, Maria's lieutenant. And
And
I
I
think
don't
that,
disagree with that.
yeah.
And
So,
I do think that there is this idea that he also could have been a threat to their game
mhm,
because
right,
he is a little unpredictable, right? We've seen the unpredictableness of Q, and so that can become an issue for your game as well when you're getting
right,
down to the when someone is going to be having to make fire, that decision is going to have to come from someone,
right.
and who is that someone that's going to be making that decision? And so I feel like that could have also been part of the deciding factor as far as game mechanics moving forward, that he's just kind of all over the place and we don't know where he's going to be coming from.
Well, not only that, if Maria and Q stuck together, there's only one more spot in the final three.
Right. Yeah.
Who wants to risk being whether or not they're that spot?
Right.
Besides just facing them in the final three, who wants to risk that?
Right. Mhm. Fair.
Now, as far as everybody else's decision, I do think targeting Charlie could have made sense, but also we talked about he's hidden his threat level,
Mhm.
maybe too much. We'll know next week. Um, and also, he may be the only person who could beat Maria in an immunity challenge going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true too. That'll be interesting.
So,
Hmm.
all right. Well, Appendix B is about the jury phase. And once again, we saw a lot of discussion about the considerations each player needs to think about moving forward. Maria, in particular, said in this tribal council that it's important to think about who's still there, who's going to be on the jury, and people are really starting to think more about who they can sit next to. Of course, she was saying that while thinking she was going to be voting out Charlie.
Mm.
I'm not sure if the others were so much worried about the same thing when it came to Q, but rather, again, seeing Q as a sort of extension of Maria herself at this point.
Yeah, and I think that unfortunately for Maria, well, I guess kudos to Charlie for hiding the relationship as much
Hmm.
as he did. So Maria benefited from Charlie's ability to hide the relationship, but then Maria clearly didn't do the same thing with Q. So I feel like that hiding of the relationship with Charlie and Maria, that was
Hmm.
more Charlie's doing
I
as
think
opposed
so.
to
Yeah.
Maria. Yeah, because Maria was like, "Oh, hey Q, let's go. Let's
Right.
go do this together."
Yeah.
Said it was pretty obvious.
Yeah. Now, from Q's point of view, he fully believed he could win. He told Mike Bloom it was the quote story of a survivor who's been on top. Then he crumbles down to the ground, but then he makes his way back and survives all the way. That's a story I can explain. And so, yeah, there may have been some worry, as we already discussed, from other players about that. I just don't think that's the overarching reason that they got rid of him.
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't think it was either.
All right. Well, then it is about time to wrap things up. So, what are your final Q thoughts?
Final Q thoughts. I am incredibly impressed with this man's confidence in himself. He did come into this game believing that he would be someone that would be likable and that he would be perceived as a shield. And I do think that at the beginning, the shield component definitely played into the game that he wanted to put forth because he was playing the game with people who didn't necessarily like what Q was putting forth. However, they saw the benefit of having Q as part of their group. And Kenzie and Tiffany really leaned in on that, even though they didn't really love the way he was presenting the Q game that he wanted to play. They saw it for what it was. And I think we've seen the same thing now with Charlie, where Charlie has seen Q as a shield for himself throughout this duration of the game he's been playing with him because Q has become so front and center. Not because he's necessarily likable, but because he's got a personality that you can't help but notice for a
Hmm.
lot of reasons. And so someone like Charlie is realizing that and flaming those ideas and adding fuel to the fire a little bit, like, oh, when people are talking about Q. And so I can appreciate the fact that Q saw things about himself coming into this game that others would perceive, but he didn't see them in the way that they're actually being utilized. And so his confidence kind of got in the way of his ability to actually play this game with the people that he was playing the game with. Instead, he told people how to play the game because he had set in his mind how he wanted to play this game. So Q just unfortunately didn't find that middle ground that you need to find, where if you realize things about yourself, take those things about yourself and put them into your game and use them to your benefit. Instead, they were used against him to the benefit of others. And so at least he got a Q shirt out of it. I mean, it sounds like they're in production, so good for you. You got a
Yeah.
Q shirt.
Q
You didn't
skirt.
need the money. Oh, Q skirt. Q
Yes.
skirt. So, I look forward to that on Amazon. We'll see what that's all about. But in the end, I think that Q was incredibly fun to watch. He kept everybody guessing, but unfortunately, when you're playing Survivor, it's not good to keep everybody guessing. So, he became everyone's focal point, unfortunately, causing his demise.
Yeah. Well, for the past 3 weeks, I've noted that the players who lost should have known they needed to play their idols, but they were fooled or fooled themselves. And now I have to say it for a fourth time. It is truly unbelievable. Yes, Q needed to play his idol. But as we've discussed for literally a month now, the important part was the background to that single move or non move. Q dominated the early game and was at risk of being voted out at some point because of it. But then he let his emotions interfere with his gameplay and knocked himself out of that leadership spot. It may have helped him temporarily because players became so nonchalant about him staying that they used him as a decoy over and over again. The funny part is that he was the decoy that helped cause the other players to not use their idols. And it wasn't until he was on the verge of regaining some power that he fell for the same thing. The tale of Q's downfall includes parts of stories we've seen before. Hunter thought he knew the math of the situation, and even though he knew he was going to get votes, he believed he'd be okay. Venus knew it was a risk to not play her idol, but wanted to solidify something going forward. Q incorporated both of these aspects, believing he'd get 1 or 2 votes, but had the majority in his favor. And he was willing to risk it because he was looking ahead and saw a path to final 3. Q told Maria, the safe move is never the best move. He was simply wrong. The safe
Mhm.
move often is the best move. And the safe move here would have been to play the idol rather than looking ahead to what might be. And I don't think many people would disagree when I say playing it would have also been the best move for Q.
Mhm.
But he and Maria were outplayed, and they believed too strongly that they still controlled the game, much like Venus. Tiffany and Hunter all thought they understood the way the game was going. And that is why Q's Christmas was canceled. I mean,
Mm.
why Q lost.
That was great. I love that he was the decoy causing his own vote, really. That was good. A little decoy spin there. I like that.
Yes.
Very nice.
All right. Well, before we get to our predictions for the finale, you're going to want to
Oh
stick around
god.
for this. Uh, I want to remind everyone that the rules we just discussed are available in poster form,
Yes, they
in
are.
poster on a t-shirt form, and in
Mhm.
checklist on a t-shirt form. So
That's
again,
right.
go to robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed and order everything your heart desires.
Yes, you definitely should. Are we doing predictions now?
No, first you have to tell people how to contact us.
Oh, we're doing that first. Okay, that's much more safe.
Yes.
So,
See, it's giving you
I
more
am at
time to
Jessica.
think about it.
I no, I have a plan. I have a
Oh,
plan.
okay. Okay.
I am at Jessica Lewis 89 on Twitter, and David Bloomberg is at David Bloomberg. He spends much more time on social media than I do these days, but I do live tweet during the episodes. And must I say that some weeks on Survivor have been better than others. This seemed to be a pretty good tweeting week
Mhm.
during the episode, so that was nice to see. But David Bloomberg is not only on Twitter. David Bloomberg is all over social media. And because he's all over social media, he has this entire page that he's just put up here for those watching the video podcast where you can find him in so many places. David Bloomberg, where can they find
Yes.
you?
You can find my Linktree at Linktree/David Bloomberg with a dot before the EE in the URL for Linktree. Or you can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg, on Threads as at David Bloomberg TV, and I'm at David Bloomberg TV there because it's connected to Instagram, and on all the video platforms, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, I am at David Bloomberg TV. I've been posting 2 or 3 videos per day. The last couple days, I posted 4. Uh,
Ooh, look
and
at you.
yeah, I mean, there was finales and other stuff going on, and so obviously I'm posting stuff from Survivor. Also, I had been posting from The Circle, although that's now over. I had been posting from The Amazing Race a little bit. That's now over. Had been posting from Deal or No Deal Island. That's now over. But
Mm,
there's still The GOAT and other shows that are coming. And so, uh, there's still a lot going on. There's still plenty to see on all those video platforms.
plenty of TikToks for David Bloomberg to make.
Yes. Yes. All right. It's time for finale predictions.
Dun dun
Dun,
dun.
dun, dun. No, after the finale, we're dun, dun, dun.
Oh
Um,
my gosh, I know. And I have so many things to get done before this time.
all right.
Okay.
5 players left.
5 players left.
There are
Yeah.
only 2 who I don't think can win based on the edit we've seen. And
Mm, I Yep, I
those are
believe I agree.
okay, those are Ben and Liz. And
Yep,
I like them both a hell of a lot.
me too.
I'm just not seeing it in the edit.
Yeah.
Then again, I wasn't seeing Erica or Gabler either. So there's that. Um, you know,
Mm,
uh,
fair.
I'm not saying they can't win. like I did with Erica and Gabler. So maybe I've
Mhm.
learned my lesson a little bit. Um, but I have to make decisions somewhere. So the question is how
Yeah.
things will proceed from here.
Yeah.
It seems obvious that if Maria doesn't win the next immunity challenge, she's a goner.
Yes.
I don't think she'll be able to convince Liz and Kenzie that Charlie is a bigger threat at the end than she is, especially after Kenzie called him the family dog in the last tribal council. Uh,
Right?
yeah. Um, if Maria does win, that may be another matter because then I do think Charlie becomes the most likely option. But based on my read of the edit, I'm going to say Maria goes next. Then we
Are
have
you
our
gonna keep
favorite.
going?
Oh,
Okay.
you can okay, or you can either way.
Well, I think so far I am in full agreement with everything you've said where, Liz and Ben are not likely winners,
Hmm.
just based on the edit. I mean, Ben, I really do feel has been not the way he's definitely not been a Tony. He's been fun to watch on TV, but I wouldn't see a Tony coming through that edit at all. And Liz, though, she had the Tevin vote.
Hmm.
She managed to pull it off, but then she was so frustrated because she didn't get the credit she
Right.
wanted. That really just overshadowed everything. And so I don't feel like she would have enough things to point at because it really did feel like she was kind of along for the ride for a lot of the things and not really leading the charge as much as she wanted to.
Yeah.
And I think it would be a very hard thing for her to convince. And Maria, I do think she is going to be, if she doesn't win immunity, she is certainly going to be targeted. However, are they putting the idol back out again?
They might. I mean, you'd be foolish not to after the way the idol has gone. I mean, they're sitting there
Right.
going, "Oh, please, someone else get it and don't use it." Now, you would be exceedingly stupid not to use it this time
Oh my
because there
God.
is there is no next vote for that.
Right. Like, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I feel like she's definitely going to be targeted for the next go round. But God,
And I hope I didn't just accidentally insult someone who does this, and they're going to be like, "Ah, David called me exceedingly stupid." But I really don't think that'll happen. So,
what? That
th-
somebody wouldn't
well,
play the idol?
right, right.
Yeah, no, that would be exceedingly stupid. So
I
I don't
mean,
think
it's
someone
happened.
would do that.
Marianne got to the end and held up her idol at the end. So if someone's looking to play a Marianne, but
Well, and that's true, but I
you know,
feel like she was in a different position. Okay,
yeah.
keep going. I
Okay.
apologize for cutting in.
So next up is Final Four fire making, our favorite. Um,
Mm.
I mentioned last week that I saw things in the edit indicating Liz would go out in fire making.
Mhm.
I'm still not 100% sure how we get to that point and why someone would put her in. But Stephen Fishback posted on Twitter. And after I had written all my notes and he posted his predictions, and I was like, damn, those are really close to mine. Uh, but his suggestion is that Charlie wins the challenge and brings Ben along.
Mhm.
And therefore, that leaves it's not so much putting Liz and Kenzie in fire making as it is not putting Ben in fire making.
That
Um,
would be fascinating.
and so I think that Liz will go out in fire making. Um,
Do we
you know,
know that Kenzie can make fire? Has there been any
she's a
indications?
dragon.
Oh.
I don't
I've
know, but we
forgotten.
know we have gotten multiple scenes of Liz not being able to make fire.
Yes, and I it's one of those situations where I hope they're not continuing to do that with someone's edit where they're just, like, showing us, like, "Ha, ha, ha, this
Well,
person
and the
can't make fire."
reflection, remember the reflection in her
Uh-huh.
glasses. So,
Yeah.
now I am also doing this because of the irony it would entail because she is a supporter of fire making as a game mechanic. So, uh,
Oh, that's correct.
so
Yes.
if she goes out in fire, it's like one of those things you can't script, that she, you know,
Yeah, that would be
so
hilarious.
yeah.
Well, I am very curious. So, okay, so you think
Not
the
so hilarious
final
if you're Liz, but
No.
yeah,
So you would think it would be Charlie, Ben, and Kenzie.
yes.
Alright. Are you gonna keep going or do you want me to jump in?
Well, do you agree, or do you have something different?
Well, see, here's the thing. Do I agree? Yes, but in my fun little brain, do I want that to happen? No. And so this is where predictions become so difficult
Hmm.
because in my world, I would love to see like a Mariah and Charlie
Maria?
going, Maria, sorry, Maria. There's so many, these names are terrible. And I have them, I have all my notes, my little notes here. My handwriting's terrible, but
Apparently, yeah.
well, it's wretched.
It
It's
was a slip of
wretched.
your brain. It's okay. We
Oh my god!
understand.
Oh, look at that! I did it. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so sorry, Maria. I
yeah.
think Maria is a badass. Okay, even though I
Mhm.
can't remember her name, and I apologize. But this is what happens when you put people on the season where their names are so close and two people look exactly the same. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. Can we stop doing that? It's not fair. Anyway, um, I do think that Maria is really incredible. And so I'm curious if there is a world in which she does win immunity in the final challenge and then gets to make that decision because there has been so many moments where like and we've talked about it. We're not going to take each other on
Mhm.
rewards and we're not going to do these things. And it would be interesting if we saw that moment, but I don't think either one of them are the type to put themselves into fire making because they
Nope.
feel like they need
Yeah.
to put that on their resume. So
Okay.
anyway, go ahead.
So
I'm
what are you
still
thinking is your final 3?
so I feel like Kenzie is definitely in the final 3
Mhm.
because she's just very likable. I don't think she's someone that's necessarily going to be targeted. It is going to come down to what obviously, I mean, this sounds silly, but what happens in the final immunity challenge.
Yeah.
So if Mariah doesn't win, I think at this
Maria.
point she's oh god, I did it again. Maria doesn't win, then I do think that people will target her because like I said, she's kind of on an island on her own at this point, right? So
Mhm.
no one's gonna be voting with her. So if she doesn't win, yes, she's gonna be the target. Oh my god, the final 3. I really do think that the Charlie, Ben, Kenzie makes sense. It really
Okay.
does make the most sense.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
All right. So, in that final 3, I think Charlie wins. Now, this is not as easy a prediction as I would have thought a week or 2 ago because Kenzie has been getting more and more great content that isn't directly
Mhm.
related to the strategy of the show, like playing up her relationship with Ben. There was all that stuff about
Oh,
her
yes.
taking care of him and all this that's not related to the strategy. Now, it could be they have 90 minutes, so they get to see more, show more of the personal relationship.
Mhm.
And the edit read is a little different on a 90-minute episode than it is in a 60-minute episode.
Mhm.
That makes a lot of people think it's part of a winner edit for her, though.
Mhm.
So it won't surprise me if I'm wrong and it's Kenzie. But we have seen so much focus on people saying, I need credit for this. I need to show that I've done this. Credit, resume, my move. If Kenzie ends up winning, I don't know what all that was about because Kenzie did do some things. And certainly, we'll, one way or the other, we'll discuss it next week. But up against Charlie, it would have to be that he did too much to hide himself, such that the jury didn't think anyone had any moves up there.
Well, and I think if we look at who's gonna be on the jury, if Maria is on the jury and we have a Charlie sitting
Mhm.
in the final 3, is she going to be coming to bat for him, or is she going
I
to be
think so.
saying you think so? Okay,
I
because 'cause I'm
think she
curious.
will, but the question will be if anyone listens to her
Right,
and if how
right.
much time there is to, it's hard to say. Um, yeah, it's just real, it's really hard to say. With all that, I'm sticking with my Charlie prediction. But again, it won't surprise me if Kenzie wins.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about who's in the jury and who's going to be potentially voting for who, depending on the relationships that they have.
Yeah,
And
Fishback went through all the different people who he thinks would vote and how. I'm not getting to that level. And he ended up predicting that Kenzie would win in a tiebreak. So
Well,
that's
but
the
that makes the Ben thing that much more
I
interesting.
know, that's why he predicted that, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I really do like what he's saying because oh,
You should
oh,
apologize for liking what Steven's saying, yes.
I'm sorry, David, but I think that would make sense as to why we're seeing so much Ben and
Mhm.
Kenzie content because it really is her. This isn't only one time. There's been multiple times where she has helped him.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, oh, Bloomberg. I think I have to agree with Steven here.
Okay, that's fine. It's probably
I'm
better
so
if we don't make the
sorry.
same pick anyway, but
I know, I know.
yeah.
And here's the thing. I think that Charlie would be an incredible winner, but
Mhm.
I also feel like
Let me just say, I think any of them would be incredible winners for
oh,
different
for
reasons.
sure. Yes. Oh, and I should
Yeah,
preface what I'm saying. The
yeah.
reason why I'm saying that is
Mhm.
because I think we are getting an edit that the players are not seeing
Right.
in regards to Charlie, which is why they're not targeting Charlie the way we're all like, "Oh my god, why are you not
Mhm.
voting out Charlie? Why you're not focusing on Charlie?" Now, that might shift if Maria is
Mhm.
on the jury and she does say, "Hey, listen, no, Charlie and I were thick as thieves and we were doing all of these things
Mhm.
together." But she might also be frustrated with Charlie or the jury doesn't listen to her.
Right.
So I'm wondering if we are getting more of a built up Charlie edit in order to make it less obvious as to who could potentially be winning.
Mhm.
But I will say Kenzie's edit has been one of kind of a not necessarily a slow build, but at the beginning, she
Yeah.
was the initial, "Oh, we need to vote out Kenzie
I
because."
mean, she's the mermaid dragon.
Yeah, well, right. So I feel like that would make sense as far as people voting for Kenzie based upon I mean, I don't know. I feel like this is a very I don't wanna say this group seems to be the type that, yes, they're looking at game moves and game mechanics, but at the same time, I don't think that there is any one person that is necessarily, we can say, kind of played as like carried the game, right? Like it's really been a lot of through across the board, various
Right.
people doing various things, and things are shifting and moving
I
a
mean,
little bit.
I think Maria and Charlie did pretty much direct the game for
But
much of the game,
right,
but they
but
did a
how much
lot of
of
it
that
undercover.
yes, and that's what I mean, it's, like, there isn't one, like, obvious
Mhm.
where I don't think it's going to be as obvious to the jury as it would be for the people who are watching because we're seeing everything and they're not, and I think there's a lot of very strong personalities that are going to be on the jury or that are on the jury that are going to want people to justify why they made certain moves, and if you have someone who was kind of struggling from where she started,
Mhm.
which was Kenzie, not Charlie. Kenzie is more of that underdog person as opposed to Charlie was on more of a winning
Yeah.
team, if you will. Kenzie wasn't, and she had to keep kind of fighting her way through. Yeah, I'm going with Steven on this one. I think that's fascinating if it comes down to a tie vote and then Ben has to vote
Mhm.
and he votes for Kenzie.
Okay. Well, we will see in 1 week. Um, until then, as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhaswebsite.com/patron. You get access to all the special podcasts that are put out just for patrons, plus the Facebook groups, Discord, and of course, you support shows like ours and everything on the network. So become a patron at robhaswebsite.com/patron. And also make sure you're subscribed to all the reality TV RHAP Up podcasts by going to robhaswebsite.com/RHAP Ups feeds and selecting your podcast service of choice. Of course, you'll get the remaining, week and a half of Survivor coverage from us, the B&B, Survivor International. Also, though, podcasts on a number of other shows and topics, from the different reality TV shows to, crime shows to, Big Brother. A lot of Big Brother stuff will be on there in a couple months now, almost exactly a couple months, as a matter of fact. So, you know, definitely subscribe that.
Maybe there's some police interrogation videos on there.
Yes, yes, because we know that if there's one thing Jeff likes, it's police interrogation videos. What are you going to do, David? We've got the bright light on you now. Oh no, what are you going? Ooh, what are you going to do? Did you do it? Were you there?
Love it.
So yes,
Oh, all right. So
Jeff,
yes, Jeff.
Jeff, get a hobby.
Love it. All right. Can I thank people?
Yes,
All right, excellent. So thank you so much to Scott St. Pierre and company for all of the editing that is done on not only this podcast, but all of the content that you just heard David Bloomberg talk about in relationship to RHAP. There is so much incredible content out there, and they all work diligently and throughout the night to do editing on these podcasts to get them out to you. So thank you so much for all of that work. Thank you to Will from America for the theme song that has been created, has been played for years now for our podcast. So thank you so much for that. And David, thank you for walking me through your predictions because you know this is not my strong suit. And I do believe that if anyone of the final five, they're all great people. I loved watching them on TV. They're incredible personalities, and it will be a joy to see this all culminate, finish, crown a winner, and hopefully everyone can get along and support each other
yes,
through the
yes.
process.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. I mean, Jessica, for
Uh,
another great episode.
I
Um,
I can't give you shit since I called Maria Mariah
yeah,
like 3 times.
exactly.
So
Um, we will, of course, be here next week with a Y blank one, and the other four people lost. Uh, it'll probably be a day later than usual because we need time to pull together all our thoughts for five people as compared to just one.
yeah,
But have no fear; it's just a day. And so we will see everyone then. And of course, you could find us on Twitter. You could find me everywhere until then.
yes.
So we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.